Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Rotary Club of Gainesville Tuesday meeting at the Cade Museum. Please silence your cell phones, and if you're watching on YouTube, please register your participation by sending an email to info@rotarygainesville.org. Up to lead us in song and pledge, Pete Enwall.
Okay, well, I thought we might concentrate on a little bit of global warming lore because it's been a hot summer, maybe the hottest on record. But anyways, so there are some good things to global warming. One is that golfers only have to buy a putter and a sand wedge, and so that's very helpful. And some bad news is that scientists have predicted that because of the rise in the oceans, that they will cover half of New Jersey, half of the state of New Jersey. And the really bad news is that it will not cover the other half of the state of New Jersey. We're going to sing, we're going to sing, "We Are the Boys of Old Florida." We are all strong for old Florida. Go ahead. In all kinds of weather, we'll all stick together. For a fellow RIDA. Go Gators! That was terrible. Gee, that was worse than the jokes. Okay, we're going to pledge allegiance to our flag now, so get serious. Put your hand on your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joining us today for our invocation via Zoom is Deborah Newell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let us pray. Gracious Creator, you alone hold the keys to the kingdom. You invite each of us up and in to join you. The children and young adults of this community, country, and world need strong, faithful, principled, and uncompromising leaders to example truth, integrity, and perseverance, even in the face of adversity. Shape us to be these people. Opportunities face each of us multiple times per day. The choices and decisions we make this minute chart a path in our lives that the current and future generations will either be built upon or spend their lives trying to overcome and repair. In your mercy and wisdom and love, we ask that you guide us to make wise and righteous choices so that future generations may live. And the people said, Amen.
If you're a guest or a traveling Rotarian, please remain standing so you can introduce yourself to the club.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Ryan Thompson. Joining me today is John Rotary. He's relatively new to Gainesville and interested in joining the club. He has new ride design and open medium, business and marketing consultant. So please help me welcome John. Also joining us today is Lachey Johnson. Lachey is with the HPW Coalition, program director, and you'll hear more from her in a few minutes.
Afternoon, Rotarians. I'm Kent Walker, and I'm proud to announce my guest, Pete Johnson, who is a longtime resident of Gainesville, has been here a long time, and we've been friends for many years. I said, you got to come to the Rotary Club. So.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Ryan Kern here. I've got two very special guests here today. Joining me is my wonderful wife, Martha. And also here with me is our exchange student, Celeste, who is joining us for Bolivia and will be here in Gainesville for 10 months at PK Young. So please give her a warm Gainesville welcome.
Ed Ellett. I am delighted to have as my guest today Mike Smith. Mike is the Vice President of Field Services for Advanced Adjusting. He's been in the insurance business, adjusting with a flood focus in particular for over 44 years. And he owns a home in Cedar Key, and compliments of Adelia is having a little of his own up close and personal experience with it. So Mike, congratulations on getting by with that. Nice to have you.
All right. This year, our board of directors approved a $300 sponsorship for the HPW Coalition's 6th annual 5K color run. The HPW Coalition is a dedicated local nonprofit, and today we have their program director, Lachey Johnson, with us to share more about the coalition's mission and impactful work. Please join me in welcoming Lachey to the podium.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to address you all. We are so privileged to be able to be partnering with the Rotary for our annual 5K opioid awareness color run. So it's actually going to be right here at Depot Park. I'm sorry, like she said, I am Lachey. HPW is a nonprofit, so one of our goals is to spread awareness of the opioid crisis and overdoses. So the Rotary has sponsored us and allowed us to provide more opportunities for runners. We are buying Narcan, which is a life-saving effect that reverses overdoses, and we're able to sponsor more youth. So we are privileged to be able to host it right here at Depot Park. It's going to be on September 22nd. That is a Sunday. Starts at 8 a.m. We're hoping that we have some flyers here. Are they over here? Where you can learn more information. However, sponsorships are still open, y'all. We have over 100,000 overdoses in the United States of America. And HPW aims to spread awareness. We also take back opioids out of the home and out of the community. So we offer DEA take back days. And again, we're just so privileged to be able to spread awareness in this way. If there are any questions, we have brochures here. Our website is on here. And again, we do appreciate the sponsorship on the annual 5K this year. Thank you.
And now, please join me in welcoming our president, Ryan Thompson.
Good afternoon, members and guests. Great to see you, Lachey. Thank you for joining us today. I think it's really important for what you do to our community and that our members know that we support you. The Seafood Spectacular, we have a date set for that, November 21st. So mark your calendars. That's the Thursday before Thanksgiving. Dwight and Wilbur Holloway are our co-chairs for this year. On Sunday, I sent out a club committee sign-up. I've heard back from a number of you. I'll send a follow-up with this because it looks like it'd be helpful to give you a little bit more information. Thank you all to all of you that have already looked at that. If you are interested in learning more about the different committees, each title for the committee is a hyperlink that'll give you send you to the description. Two new committees that we've formed. One is on mentors. Only a third of our new members are sponsored by an individual within this club. So 2/3 of our new members don't have a sponsor, and that's the mentorship is a way for us to address that. And really, it's an undetermined period of time, but you're really encouraged to join the new members at meetings, fellowships, and service projects, and get them more acquainted within the club. The second one is community service and grants. Over recent years, we've kind of dedicated or addressed this through fund and fellowship, but we thought it would be helpful to separate that out into a different committee, focusing on service projects. From the surveys, a number of people have wanted to get more out into the community type service projects, hands dirty, out, immediate feedback, or gratification rather. So Greg Young is going to be leading that effort. Another component of that committee is also grants. We want to encourage our members to think of grant ideas. The district returns some of our contributions to the Rotary Foundation through grants, and we want to make sure that we take advantage of those opportunities. So this committee will also serve as a resource to those with grant ideas. With that, I will turn it over to Guy. Is Guy here? He is. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. I'm very excited to welcome our program today. Craig Fugate served as President Barack Obama's FEMA administrator from May 2009 to January 2017. Previously served as Governor Jeb Bush's emergency management director from 2001 to 2007, and Governor Charlie Crist from 2007 to 2009. He led FEMA through multiple record-breaking disaster years and oversaw the federal government's response to major events such as the Joplin and Moore tornadoes, Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Matthew, and the 2016 Louisiana flooding. He set a clear and compelling vision, mission, and priorities for FEMA and relentlessly drove the agency to achieve better outcomes for survivors. His effectiveness in dealing with more than 500 presidentially declared major disasters and emergencies under his leadership restored the faith of the American people and federal government's ability to respond to disasters. Prior to his tenure at FEMA, he was widely praised for his management under Governor Jeb Bush's of the devastating effects of the 2004 and 2005 hurricane seasons with Hurricanes Charlie, Francis, Ivan, Jean, Dennis, Katrina, and Wilma. Craig provides senior level advice and consultation in disaster management and resiliency policy through Craig Fugate Consulting, LLC. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Craig Fugate.
This is a very friendly crowd. When they said it was at the Cave Museum and everything, I'm like, okay, that's over on Depot Avenue. I'm very familiar with that area. I'm so familiar with that, I remember when Lou Henry's sheriff's office was in the old county jail back there, and as ambulances, we used to get our fuel over there. So I've been around a while. I've seen a lot of changes in our community, but I also have had the opportunity to work, and I'm not saying I'm rare, but it's kind of unusual for somebody who actually started out driving ambulances for Alachua County and ended up running FEMA. I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of like unusual, but it happened. And part of the reason it happened was I always got to work with great teams. I had leadership who, for whatever reason, had confidence in me when I didn't even have confidence. Probably the first person that gave me a shot at doing what I do today was Bob Fernandez when he was county administrator. I was a lieutenant in fire rescue. I'd been detailed downtown. I was updating some stuff. He asked about me and decided I was probably wasting my talents on the road, and I didn't see the back of an ambulance any further, and that was in '87. The next person saw faith in me or confidence was the director of Florida Division of Emergency Management, Joe Myers, tapped me to come up in 1997. And then when Joe left, Governor Bush asked me to be his director with conditions. I was telling somebody they were going to do this big national search when Joe left. I was the interim director. I get a call from Governor Bush. It's right after 9/11. He says, I'm going to announce you tomorrow. I'm like, huh? I thought you guys were doing a natural search. He said, no, you were my guy the whole time. And I'm going to announce you tomorrow. John Aganobi was Secretary of Health. He was going to get announced. And I said, I'm honored, sir. He said, you're going to have to change your affiliation. And that's what I said, nothing. And there was a long pause. And he said, you'd turn me down, wouldn't you? I said, yes, sir. So I guess I can have one Gator on my team. And then 20 years ago today, we were in the midst of responding to Hurricane Charley. And at about this time, something got created by accident. And that's what I want to talk to you about is there's all kinds of things that I've done, but this is kind of one I think is kind of interesting. And it's one of these things I get associated with all the time. And so I figure I'd give you the story of where did the Waffle House Index come from. This is 2004. I can tell you how far apart those storms were. Actually, the one that's not up there is Bonnie. Bonnie hit the day before as a tropical storm up in the Big Bend. That was August 12th. August 13th, Charley makes landfall as a Cat 4 on Punta Gorda, crosses the state as essentially a 10-mile wide tornado. It blew the second and third floors off of hotels over on Sand Lake, over by the International Airport. 22 days later, we get this big, wet, slow-moving storm called Francis that took about 2 days to cross the state. And we saw impacts as far north as Alachua County, down in Micanopy and on the east side of the county. There was a lot of impacts. 11 days later, we get another big hurricane coming through, Hurricane Ivan. Comes into Pensacola Bay. The bay has come up so high that the I-10 bridge is actually starting to float, and waves are pushing sections off. And there's the famous picture of the tractor gone and the trailer on the bridge. And the tractor driver lost his life, but literally blew the I-10 bridge off. 9 days later, Gene makes landfall. It was a busy year, and we were having to adjust and continue. You know, people talk about process improvement. This is in real time, under tremendous demands. And we had to do things that were going to work. You just couldn't work your plan. If the plan was a mismatch between what was required, you had to adjust. And nobody had ever written a plan for 4 hurricanes. So that was our year. And there's Governor Bush. I'm a little bit younger too. The guy there doing the briefing was Ben Nelson, our meteorologist. He's a key player in the story, so remember Ben Nelson. He currently works for the National Weather Service office, so if you're getting any of your forecast out of Jacksonville, Ben's one of the forecasters up there. But at that time, he was our state meteorologist. He just got the job because the guy we had just left to go to the Hurricane Center. So this was Ben's first year. You talk about intimidation, you got to brief Governor Bush, and nothing you're saying is good news. We had so much impact, but one of the things we started seeing early on, and this has been true about every disaster I've dealt with, power outages drove the bulk of our response. If you looked at the areas that lost power versus actual damage, it was usually 10% actual damage, 90% was just being driven by power outage. Once you got the power back on, you could then focus on the areas that had the physical damages. We were getting a lot of boiled water, and this is kind of surprising. People don't live down here, is our trees wrap their roots around the water system. And so you think, well, water, those systems aren't going to be affected by high wind. Well, when the trees blow over, the two things they'll do is they'll rip out every water line and every sewer line. And you'll lose pressure, you'll have to go to boiled water, or you won't have any water pressure. And stores were closed, no power, everything's out. And you got to remember, this first storm, Charley, hit about a dozen counties, but 3 of them were devastated. Charlotte County, DeSoto, and Henry County were just like ground zero. The problem we had was it was hard to communicate that because the national media is just focused on 2 places, Orlando and Ponta Gorda, and everything in between we were dealing with. And so I had a couple of county directors got mad at me because we weren't sending them everything they thought they wanted or needed. And I couldn't really convey to them how bad things were. And if you've ever seen any of these reports we'd write War and Peace every 12 hours about damages, power outages, but it was always in the context of how many were out. Problem is, if you got 6,000 customers without power in DeSoto County, that's a lot worse than 6,000 people without power in Volusia County. Except Volusia County says, I got 6,000 people without power, I need food, water, and ice. Like, we're busy. Can you pick up the slack? And I realized people didn't have an idea how bad it was. So we came up with this idea of something simple, because we needed something very quick we could visualize. So we Okay, that was a yellow one. We're back to green. But we started looking at these things, and instead of looking at this, just leafing through page after page of data, we just real quick indicators. So I'll give you an example, search and rescue. If we had not started search and rescue in a county, they were red. If we had search and rescue ongoing, they were yellow. And if we had gotten an all clear, they went to green. Water. If they had no water pressure, they're red, because you can't fight fire with no water pressure. If they were under boiled water, they were yellow, because at least they had water pressure to fight fires and you could flush toilets. And if they had water pressure and they didn't have a boiled water, they were green. And so we were using this, and it was very effective. It quickly communicated this to the point where Governor Bush, we did one on school closures, and that became his first question. How many counties are still red? No schools are open. And he wanted to move that to yellow and then green. But here's how the Waffle House came about. I had always been used in my career of going to the scene. I guess it was me just being a paramedic and a lieutenant fire rescue. I always go to the scene. So when Charlie hit, I went down range. And I was fortunate. I had a really strong chief of my operations to run the state EOC. He didn't need me. And it freed me up to go down range. And my observation was, it's hard to make good decisions when you're sitting in a room with air conditioning, looking at screens, trying to figure out how bad something is. It's better to go down there and actually get on the ground. It also means I can solve problems faster, because I wouldn't have to wait for things to come up and go back. I'm right there, I can make decisions. So I went down range. I had a couple of folks with me. Ben Nelson, state meteorologist, was with me, and I had Tad Warfel, Florida National Guard major at that time. He's now retired Colonel Tad Warfel, works for the VA. But we went down. Actually, I went down with Governor Bush the morning after. So Saturday morning, I go down there. It is so bad, and I was supposed to be on the plane going back. I just looked at the governor and says, I'm not going back, I'm staying. He said, yeah, you probably need to. I had everything I had in my pockets. That was it. Spent my first night sleeping in the bottom of our floor of our command post, which is chilly and hard. Got up next morning, and President Bush came in, and no shower, no shaving, wearing the same clothes I've had on for like 2 days, and it was warm down there. We were probably dealing with temperatures in the hundreds. We get through all that, and so that evening, Tad's down there, Major Warfel's down there, Ben's down there, Tad's got a place for a stay. We go down range, we go to get some sleep. Get up next morning about 4:30, 5 o'clock. Our day started early. We didn't know when they were going to end, and we didn't know when we were going to get to eat. So we got up early to go find something to eat. We were down south of Ponta Gorda. Well, I was in the Fort Myers. Get on the interstate, nothing's open. We start driving south, and that's what we see. We pull in. If you've ever gone to the Waffle House, you're familiar with those big plastic menus with all the good stuff on there. They handed us a paper sheet, mimeographed. Lady said, this is all we got. We lost power, we lost freezer, threw everything out. This is only what we got. It's all good. Hey, it's hot food, we ate. Next day, similar thing, except this time when we get to the interstate, we didn't have to go south. That Waffle House was opened up. We went in there, looked at the guy that was behind the grill, says, weren't you at the other one? So yeah, I'm helping open them up, get them open. But it was the same deal. Limited menu, got open. Well, again, we're on about day 3, day 4 of this response, and I get this put into my slide deck. Tad and Ben had put this together, and it was just slipped in. And again, I got about 30 pages I'm flipping through real quick, and this is in there. And so this was the original Waffle House Index. The index said if it's closed, it's red. If they're open but got a limited menu, they're yellow. And if they open and got a full menu, it's green. If Charlie had been the only storm that year, you'd have never heard of this. Except it wasn't. And something else had changed. After Hurricane Andrew, we learned the lesson, and a lot of times lessons learned are the wrong lessons you learn. What we thought we had learned from Hurricane Andrew was, if you remember how delayed the response was down there, it was about 72 hours before anything got going. So what the theory was, they need to do a better job of assessing so they know to go earlier. Problem is, every time you send people down to go do an assessment, by the time they get back with the information saying it's bad, it's about 72 hours. And I was kind of just radical. I said, well, why don't we do something different? If we get a major hurricane making landfall, let's just pretend like it's bad and go. And that's what we did in Charlie. We were on the ground handing out supplies in 36 hours after landfall. Never been done by anybody before. Next storm, Francis, was kind of a diffuse issue, was not as concentrated, but here comes Ivan. Ivan tore up the panhandle. And we were sitting there all staged, and when I say all, I mean you've got National Guard, fire chiefs, law enforcement, Red Cross, Salvation Army, Catholic Church, you name it, whoever was going. And we had search and rescue teams all staged at the fairgrounds in Tallahassee. And what we were going to do is, as soon as the tropical force winds started coming down, we were going. We were getting on the interstate, and we were driving to where the storm hit. The problem with that, I always get the question of, well, how do we know we're there? Because if you've ever been around a hurricane, you'll see damages far away from the devastation. So I'm sending them in, and they're going, when do we know we're there? The Waffle House. You ever been on I-10? How many exchanges don't have a Waffle House? And so that's what they did. They started driving. If the Waffle House was open, had a menu, they didn't stop. It didn't mean there weren't impacts, but it didn't require search and rescue, that's for sure. If they got there and the Waffle House was open but had a limited menu, they'd dump off all of the relief folks to go help, because you probably had a lot of power outages, you probably had water problems, people were going to need supplies. They didn't need search and rescue, though. That wasn't the kind of damage we had. And if you got there and the Waffle House was closed by the storm, go to work. And keep working your way in until you meet the locals coming out. And so we did that a couple of times, and that was the end of the 2004 hurricane season. But I would get asked to go do presentations on the four storms that year. So I threw this in there. It kind of got a chuckle out of people. And then we got hurricanes hitting us again. Dennis, one of the earliest hurricanes to make landfall in Florida, Cat 3 in the Panhandle, right after July weekend. Katrina hit us and then slammed into the state. Remember I said we learned a lot of lessons from Hurricane Andrew. One of our lessons the late Governor Childs implemented was mutual aid between states and formalized that. That became the Emergency Management Systems Compact. And under that, under Governor Bush's authority, Governor Barber had asked for help. We had like 6,000 people in Mississippi, and they were getting there the night of the storm. And they were using Waffle House. Because when they got up to I-10 to head down to Pascagoula, that Waffle House was yellow. When they got down to Pascagoula, they were sending me back pictures of slabs going, we may need another level. And that's where we did search and rescue. But Waffle House, they followed me. I go to FEMA, and this kind of followed me. And I was there a couple of months, and everybody's wanting to take meetings, and, you know, my staff's trying to screen out most of them. But they got one that was kind of interesting. They said, hey, the folks at Waffle House want to meet with you. I'm like, why? They didn't say, but they want to bring up their attorney and their CFO and their CEO. I'm like, well, that ain't good. I'm thinking I'm about to get hit with a cease and desist from using Waffle House in any of these things. Well, they come up, we meet, and it was actually the opposite. They were like, man, you made us up our game, you know, because now everybody expects us to be open. And I said, well, how do you guys do it? I'm thinking you must have this really elaborate procedure stuff. Says, nope. Our only real thing is we just tell our folks, show up. And we dispatch our CEO. And the three of them there said, no, we go down range. The CFO goes to the bank and gets out wads of cash because they know they're going to be doing entirely cash. They can't count on ATMs or anything. And if you remember, for a long time, Waffle House didn't even take credit cards. Second thing they're going to do is they're going to load up their trailers. They know, and this is where this yellow came from, if they lose any power, they toss everything. They don't take a risk. So they know what to pack. And if they don't have water, they know what kind of things they need to do to be able to serve and operate without water. And so we got to talking, and it was really interesting. But it was just really this idea that they show up. And they tell all their staff that. But it's kind of, to me, it's always heartening when, you know, the CEO of that company is in those Waffle Houses. And he says, they won't let me cook or work the cash register, but I'm pretty good at picking up trash and mopping the floors. But they get on the ground because that means it shortens down the decision time between what they're seeing and what it needs to get that store open. Now, there's some erroneous stories that somehow Waffle House Index got created in Joplin after the F5 tornado hit there. And that was the first time Missouri had ever heard of the Waffle House Index. They got Waffle Houses, and it got mentioned, so they thought this is where it got created. I said, no. But here's what happened. Joplin hits. I was actually somewhere else, had to fly across country to get there for that tornado. First day was an all day, and I'm like dragging. And we're heading back to where we had a hotel room outside the area of devastation. If you've ever seen a tornado, you go from nothing standing to everything looks normal in about 2 blocks. So as we came out of the area where this tornado, which is about 1.5 miles to 2 miles wide and 15 miles long slab, was the only thing you had left. We get to we get to a Starbucks, and there's cars all surrounding it. And I'm like, pull in, I need coffee. And we pull in, we go up to the door, it's closed. They're under a boiled water order. My guys are like, why are all these cars here? Then it dawned on us, they didn't turn off the Wi-Fi. And everybody who had lost their homes were going up there to try to file claims or send emails or let people know they're okay. So we go about 2 blocks more, and guess what? Where we turned into our hotel, there's a Waffle House. I said, pull in there, they'll have coffee. They go, no, we're under boiled water order. I said, watch this, pull in. Sure enough, there's this, should have been my grandmother, those big 5-gallon jugs of water, pouring it into the top of the coffee maker. And they had coffee. And the difference was, Starbucks plumbs their coffee machines. They can't make manual coffee. Starbucks doesn't. They could. And Waffle House was open with a limited menu, no ice for your drinks. You get canned or coffee, but you weren't going to get anything else, no soda fountains. And they had a limited menu, and everything was disposable. And so they really emphasized this. And it's something I think is a leadership lesson that I've always taken to heart. I believed in this, but I have found that leadership on the ground, not sitting back in the office, not just reading reports, not just second guessing, but leadership on the ground in a crisis is the best, fastest way to manage an event. That's what Waffle House does, that's what I did, and that's the lesson I've learned in disasters. It's real easy sitting in a room with the air conditioning's working, you got fresh coffees, and the toilets are flushing, to forget who you're serving and what they're going through if you're not out there with them. And they got pretty good at this. I've been up there, I met with them, and they don't advertise. That was the other reason they came and said, man, you're great for us. You've had us in the Wall Street Journal. People have actually written papers on our logistics. You know, you're getting us all kinds of advertising, and we don't even advertise. So that was the Waffle House. Ben Nelson and Tad Warfel started that. I kind of popularized it. But if you think about it, you can learn a lot by looking at what's open and what's closed, because it will tell you a lot of things about infrastructure. So the final thing, coming back to Starbucks. There was this earthquake in California a couple of years ago. It was a pretty major earthquake, and initially the news was about how devastating it was going to be, and I see the first images coming out of a county emergency operations center. You know what they were drinking? Starbucks. Now, being in government, and even in California, I don't know of too many government agencies that can afford to provide Starbucks to their staff during EOC activations. So that told me several things. One, the roads were open because the staff could get in. Two, they had water pressure, and it was not under boiled water because they were drinking Starbucks, and I already knew they couldn't make it if the water was being boiled. And the people at Starbucks could get to work. So I just looked at that and says, it ain't that bad. And everybody says, they haven't finished doing assessments yet. I'm like, if Starbucks is open, it ain't that bad. With that, I want to thank you for the opportunity, for the service you give to our community. I grew up here, been part of this community for a long time, and I know what the service organizations like Rotary mean to our community. So thank you very much. Are we doing questions? Okay.
I think, Mr. Fugate, I missed you as being my boss because I was with FEMA for about a year, ending right as COVID began. First as an estimator and then on the ground in Puerto Rico for that big storm as an inspector. But I was really impressed with how efficient FEMA is in operations. And I just wanted to convey that. Thank you.
Mr. Fugate, Mike Conroy,
I'm just Craig. The only time I do Mr. Fugate is when I'm either being sworn in and testifying before Congress, which usually is not a fun thing to do, or there's somebody serving a subpoena. So
you can have an attorney if you so choose. I got into insurance restoration in 1980. I worked for disaster cleanup. I used to do a lot of stuff for Courageous and Transamerica and so forth. And I used to chase storms because they're exciting. And you are a rock star, sir. Since those hurricanes that you talk about and your ability to perform without ego, with the greatest humility, and to get crap done effectively has always impressed me, whether it's at the state or at the FEMA level. And somebody's got to say it. You know, if we had more people like you in government, we wouldn't have half as many problems.
Well, I appreciate the comments, but I always found that I learned this the hard way from going from micromanagers. You got to know what you're good at and what you're not, and always hire the people that are better at the things you're not good at. Tell them where you want to go and get out of their way. We got faster and better because I didn't try to run everything myself. I trusted my team. But my job was basically to run the interference and keep everybody focused on the task and get out of their way. And I found that worked for me, it worked for my teams, and it's not hard to do.
Hi, Betsy Riley. I am working with the county to put together our climate action plan. It's our first ever, so we're hoping to get it right. And I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts on when you saw communities that were maybe more resilient to disaster, what was the infrastructure like? What did they focus on before the emergency happened?
Basically, they planned for big floods. Nashville got hit, if you remember the 2010 floods in Nashville. I was just at the Grand Ole Opry, so they were showing me how high the water got in the Grand Ole Opry. I'm like, man, this is pretty bad. Well, you were FEMA administrator, you didn't know? I said, no, you're a business, you weren't my problem. Because we only dealt with governments and uninsured losses. So Nashville did something a while back that you would never get through zoning or the developers. And that was a requirement to build everything 3 feet above base flood elevation, not the minimum 1 foot. And in that flood, based upon that, and this was only in the special flood risk area, so that people will tell you that's where you have to buy flood insurance if you have a federally backed mortgage. It's not an indicator of what will flood. They averted about $1 billion in losses. And what's really critical, I think, that we need to understand is if you look at Alachua County, wind's going to be a problem, but that's going to be mainly power outages. You'll get some roofs and stuff like that. The one analog storm we know back in the late 1800s came through here and basically knocked all the trees down so you could stand in High Springs and see all the way into Fort White. But our biggest problem here is going to be extreme rainfall events. And when you talk about extreme rainfall events, I want you to think about this. We've had 6 inches, we've had 12 inches, we've got our usual suspects that always flood. I used to live between Hogtown and Possum Creek. When Irma came through, we got so much rain I could hear the trees out there on the boardwalk falling over and crushing everything. But we didn't flood a lot of homes. We had the usual areas. Dump 24 inches of rain in this basin. And what happens? And it will be catastrophic. So I think when we're talking about climate impacts and building resiliency, we got to look at infrastructure, number one. Power, more we underground, so all the new subdivisions are safe. It's the feeder lines and stuff like that. We need to harden our underground. We need to really think about flooding on a scale we're not used to. And you guys remember back in the 98 when we had El Nino and we had people who had built in dry lake beds because it hadn't flooded in 30 years. They thought it was a permanent condition. And then the water table came back up. So I'm not saying we can't build. I'm saying we need to be really thinking about where we're building. We also got to make sure we preserve enough of the environment to soak up the rainfall and all that moisture, because the natural solutions are better than trying to pump it or keep it out of somebody's home. One of the reasons why Gainesville did so well in Irma is because you got so many greenways built around Possum and Hogtown and all these creeks that if you had let developers have their say, would have been condos, apartments, and homes that would have flooded. And people say, well, that takes away assessed value. I'm like, those recreational areas actually add value to those homes. So it isn't a subtraction. We also got to deal with heat. And this is going to be key because if you look at the most vulnerable communities, it's the people that can't afford GRU electric bills, don't have air conditioning, and don't have the resources. And the leading cause of death from weather phenomenon is extreme temperatures. And I worked a lot of those as a paramedic, particularly when we first decided to play Miami after we enclosed the south end zone, and nobody figured out that with no breeze and artificial turf, it was going to be a hot day, and we were playing at noon. I don't know how many alumni I carted over my shoulder because we had run out of stretchers. So, but when you're thinking about this, think about the infrastructure, extreme water, and then the most vulnerable populations. And we have to plan for the acute phase of we need cooling shelters, we need to have plans, just like we do for cold weather, for extreme heat. But I think it's more important to look at there are areas of this county that are beautiful like they are. Don't build there. They serve a purpose. They protect us during extreme rainfall events. And it keeps the property values up because it gives us green space. And where we are building, we need to think about maybe elevating homes that are not in the special flood risk area would make sense. Slab on grade construction isn't a good idea in a flood. And I love, if you ever go down to South Florida, you see all these pictures around coastal areas of these, it's flooded. And I'm like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. The streets are flooded, the houses aren't. They're up, bermed up, and elevated. But building slab on grade with that kind of rain potential, it's not that hard to do. We may need to start thinking about it. Our building codes are set by the state. They're not bad, but I still think it comes back to what are our most extreme events we're going to face, and it's basically going to be rain and our temperatures, extreme heat. What we can do to adjust, build, or improve our infrastructure to handle that. How we deal with the acute effects. And then again, how do we keep a resilient community? Because the big thing I find is the quicker you get power back up, the quicker you get your water back up, the quicker you get schools open, the faster communities recover. Long answer, sorry.
Those are great questions, but we have the most important question from Jenny Van Hart on the Zoom. What was the limited paper menu at Waffle House?
No steaks, no ham, bacon, eggs, grits, hash browns, orange juice, coffee, and carton milk. I think that was about it. So you could get your eggs any way you wanted. But your cheese grits was cheese, a slice of cheese put in your grits, and you stir it.
That's how you do it.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know how much time we got left, but I was wondering if you could share with us what's going on with evacuation plans, because we've seen I-75 just totally crowded, and the chance, some idea about building something else over near the West Coast, but that hadn't worked out. So how's that doing?
Well, if people do what we recommend, they only need to go in about 10 miles. Most people are running away from wind. Wind's not the big killer. Biggest killer in hurricanes is storm surge followed by inland flooding from fresh water. And the majority of the deaths we had in Hurricane Ian were that. They drowned. If they had gone 10 miles in, they wouldn't have drowned. It wasn't very complicated. But we do see people running from the wind. And it causes problems because if you think about it, our infrastructure barely handles rush hour traffic. It was never built for the maximum number of people hitting the road. And I'll give you some numbers. Sarasota County, I did some work for them after Ian. The most they'd ever sheltered from all the storms that threatened them was about 2,000 people. And Hurricane Ian, if you remember, that one was actually, no, it was Irma. Irma was coming up initially to southeast Florida. So all the people there evacuated across Alligator Alley to the West Coast. Then it shifted. Now they're all coming up from Collier County and Fort Myers and running up the west coast. And Sarasota County ended up sheltering over 20,000 people because they came up the interstate and couldn't go much further because it was backing up at the I-4 Spaghetti Junction. And then we dealt with this when I was with Hurricane Bush and Hurricane Floyd. We had about 3 million people evacuate for what should have been about 700,000 people. And I know this because Governor Bush's wife, Columba, was telling him that he needed to do something to fix this because Jebby was stuck in traffic coming from the boarding school for 12 hours from Jacksonville back to Tallahassee. So we began doing things like contraflow operations, which is fancy engineering talk for reverse laning. We've done all this stuff, but the reality is we can't pave our way out of this. We need to build in such a way that people can shelter closer to where they live. And again, some people are going to choose to leave and go early and be prepared. It's going to take a while. I tell people on average, and this has been, when I look at the numbers, it's pretty true, evacuation traffic is 5 times slower than rush hour traffic. It took people from Jack's Beaches to get to 295 and I-10 roughly 4.5 to 5 hours. And they didn't need to get that far. They just had to get off the barrier islands, which, I sometimes wonder, you live on a barrier island and then you wonder why you got destroyed in a hurricane. I'm like, well, it's because it's called the barrier island, but that's just me.
Let me present you something. Greg, if you could join me. Don't sit down yet. Greg, an honor for you speaking with us today. I'd like to present a donation to Child Center for Early Learning on your behalf. Thank you very much. A reminder of next week's speaker is Ginger Griffith with Partnership for Strong Families. Quote of the day: there's no harm in hoping for the best as long as you're prepared for the worst. That's Stephen King. Rotary reading safari drawing is 358. 358. The meeting is adjourned.
Oh, thanks, sir. 2 microphones go out in the same meeting.